Once again, I'm calling the meeting of the Corrections and Juvenile Justice Committee to order, March 3rd, 2025. On the agenda today is to work two companion or complementary bills. That's House Bill 2325 and House Bill 2329. Before we get started with discussion and any amendments, I thought it would make sense for me to explain sort of the process that I think will be most useful. I've worked with the reviser on this, and the reason I think I need to explain it to begin with is I do have amendments to both bills. Generally speaking, the way we're proposing to proceed is to first take up House Bill 2325. As I said, I have some amendments, and anyone else who has amendments would be free at that time to make those known, and we'll discuss and vote on them. After we finish with amendments to 2325, rather than vote on the bill as amended or not amended, we will move then to 2329, which is what I'm calling the group homes bill. And I will then move to amend that bill by merging 2325 with it. The reviser suggested that as the most efficient and kind of easiest to follow process. And then we will take any further amendments to 2329. Assuming the two bills have been merged, subject to our vote, we would then proceed to vote on the unified bill. So it'd be 2329 as amended. Once again, that's just the process I'm proposing. Clearly, there may be other amendments. Some of the amendments that I just talked about may not pass, and we may have to adjust that. But that's how I see us proceeding. So why don't we then turn to 2325, and I'll just start briefly. It's my bill. As we all know, we've been thinking about this for some time. We had hearings. There were also some related hearings in the Child Welfare Committee last week, I believe, on House Bill 23. What is it? What's the House Bill 23? What's the House? I'm sorry, the Senate Bill 367, which is what we're proposing to amend here. And so just in the broadest of terms, what I've been hearing from the various stakeholders for the last several months is Senate Bill 367 was a good bill. It did a lot of good things for our juvenile justice system. One of the primary objectives of that bill was to move our juveniles, a lot of them, out of the correctional facility, and it accomplished that to good effect, I think, from all I can gather. The problem is that in doing that, it created a problem for what I'm calling the mid-level, often repeat offenders. They were taken out of the correctional facility and sent into the communities for community service, and oftentimes they were sent into the foster care homes, and the foster care homes were not trained. The people running them, the parents, weren't trained in handling and how to handle these youth, and they were being put into situations where they were living with children who hadn't been juvenile offenders and were in need of care, but they weren't being helped to be housed with the juvenile offenders. So we also heard from law enforcement, from judges, from social workers that oftentimes, especially the judges and law enforcement didn't feel that they had the tools that they needed to handle some of these chronic offenders. In particular, they wanted somewhat more authority or discretion to, in some instances, detain them for short periods of time to get them where there's sort of a crisis circumstance in a foster care, for instance, that they could take them out of that circumstance for days or in some sense, sometimes weeks. And they also wanted the opportunity or the discretion, authority to move these children into what I'm calling group homes, which are not prisons, not detention, but they are much more structured than a foster care home. And hopefully the people running them are more trained to handle these problem youths. So with that, as an introduction, I am going to move to my amendment on 2325 and ask that the balloon amendment be passed out. You know, actually, I forgot to ask Jason to review the 2325. I think I kind of did it, but I think it makes sense for you to go through it with some more particularity. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, Jason Thompson, Revisor's Office. So the high points of House Bill 2325, it authorizes judges to commit juvenile offenders to detention for technical violations of probation. It increases the cumulative detention limit for juvenile offenders, and it increases the criminal penalties for juvenile offenders who use a firearm in the commission of an offense or offenders who are repeat offenders. The first section is about the sentencing alternatives, and that is where you find the firearm provision. So if a firearm was used in the commission of an offense, which would constitute a felony if it was committed by an adult, the judge may commit the juvenile directly to the Secretary of Corrections for placement in a juvenile correctional facility or a youth residential facility, and then the minimum term of 6 months to 18 months is increased in the bill to a minimum of 12 months and a maximum of 36 months. And it's also if a firearm was possessed or used during the commission of that offense. The second section is the one about placement in a correctional facility, a juvenile correctional facility. There's a provision about chronic offenders, the repeat offenders the chairman was talking about. There's a high-risk assessment requirement, and the bill removes that requirement so that those offenders, regardless of risk level, could be sent to the correctional facility. The third section is the case length limits, which are currently 45 days for detention over the course of the case, and the bill increases that to 90 days cumulative detention limit. The fourth section is the technical violations of probation that I mentioned. Right now, you can be sent for 24 hours, 48 hours, et cetera, for violations, and the bill proposes to add including technical violations. And the last section is the juvenile intake and assessment statute, and the bill has a provision that requires an override function for detention risk assessment tools, so that if an offender uses a firearm possesses or uses a firearm during the commission of their offense, the assessment is overridden and the person is placed in detention automatically.
Thank you. So that is 2325, and we will now consider my amendment. Yeah, I do. Well, we're going to discuss the amendment after I explain.
Okay. Yeah. I just didn't know what the formal process was.
Yeah. Yes, Representative Smith, do you have a question?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Mr. Chair. You know, I know what breaking probation is, but help me out on technical violation. What's a technical violation?
Right. Right. So we'll let the revisor address that, and then I'll say something more about that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, so technical violations, I was trying to find the sort of more formal definition. It's referenced many times throughout this bill and throughout the sections that are in the bill. One specific example that is not a technical violation is absconding from supervision, so that is more than a technical violation. Other than that, the definition is not in this bill, so I was trying to find the more formal definition, but it's essentially, you know, it's not a new offense, it's not absconding, it's something lesser. So I'll try to get you a more specific definition if I can find one.
Yeah, we'd appreciate that. My understanding is it's something like not showing up for probation office visit or that kind of violation. Or not going to school when you're supposed to go to school, truancy, that kind of stuff. So now turning to the amendment, we can just start on the first page, which has to do with, did you find it? Yeah. Okay, why don't you give it to us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the reason it's not is because we're not amending the definition section for the Juvenile Offender Code in this bill, but it's right there in KSA 38-2302, the definition section for the Juvenile Offender Code. It's an act that violates the terms or conditions imposed as part of a probation that does not constitute a new juvenile offense or a new child in need of care violation. It's pretty much what I said. Not a new offense, and then the not absconding, but that's the official definition.
Right. Thank you. So the First Amendment, and these are my amendments, and I should say I worked with the ranking on this. We didn't agree on everything, and I'm not suggesting that he's on board with all these changes, but many of them we worked together on, and I think he was happy with some of them. The first is to strike the reference to technical violations in the bill. Essentially, it was redundant. Under the current law, the judges did have that authority if there was a technical violation, and this is a chronic offender, and there were other conditions. Let me see if I can go to that. 13 to 15. Yeah, 13 to 15. So it's Section 4. When a juvenile is placed on probation pursuant to KSA 38-2361 amendments thereto, a judge may commit such juvenile to detention for violation of probation, and the original bill added including technical violation, and for contempt of court if the judge makes a finding that the juvenile is demonstrating escalating use of physical violence, aggression, weapons, damage to property, or life-threatening substances. So we just took out the bills including a technical violation because it already was in the original act. Some people reading that will say, oh my gosh, goodness, the judge can send a juvenile to detention if he doesn't show up for one probation meeting, and that's actually not true because he has to also make a finding that the juvenile is demonstrating or escalating physical violence, aggression, weapons, damage to property, or life-threatening substance. So bottom line is that that portion of the bill remains current law. We aren't changing it in any way. We're taking out the bill's original statement explicitly that it included technical violations. The second change is the change to the maximum term for adjudication involving a firearm from proposed 36 months to 26 months. The law currently to 24, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you for that correction. The law is the current law is that under those conditions where a firearm is used or possessed during the commission of an offense, actually current law is if a firearm is used during the commission of offense, the judge can commit them to detention for up to 18 months. The original bill that I put together allowed for 36 months. The amendment takes that down to 24, so it's between the current law and the original bill's proposal of 36 months. The next amendment has to do with chronic offenders. And the original bill, the law currently requires that to commit the juvenile, the judge has to have a risk assessment on the high end. The bill that I originally proposed removed any risk assessment for doing that. And the amendment that I'm proposing says that it can be done if the risk assessment is either moderate or risk or high. So once again, it's sort of a compromise between current law, my original proposal, and then the amendment. And then the last amendment is on the last page, and it really is not substantive. It's just clarification. It replaces the language shall override detention risk assessment tool score to order direct placement, which was somewhat redundant, so we just have the language place such juvenile in a juvenile detention facility. So I think that's the sum and substance of the amendments in this balloon amendment to 2325, and now we're open for discussion. Yes, Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to scoot myself up a little bit closer because I feel like I am leaning in a lot. I'm trying for the 24 months, up to 24 months. Is there any way that can potentially be, would a 10-year-old be potentially, could potentially be sentenced to have about 20% of the life that they've lived on the outside of the world? So is that 24 months more so for who's eligible to fall into that 24 months? Is there like are you thinking more 16-year-olds or 10-year-olds?
I'll ask the reviser, but I think that the point is that this gives the judge discretion. I would think that most judges aren't going to sentence a 10-year-old to 24 months.
I encourage you to look and see what happened in
Excuse me, can I speak?
Pennsylvania. Sorry.
I don't think most judges would do that, but we're going to check with the reviser on that.
Mr. Chairman, I would just say that, juvenile offender is 10 to 18, right? That's the definition. And the provision here specifies a juvenile offender who possesses or uses a firearm. The term would be 12 months to 24 months. That's the state of the two laws, I suppose.
Yeah, but that is the case, and I would just say that I think the signal needs to be sent very strongly and firmly to juveniles and to anyone that if you use a gun, you possess a gun in the commission of a crime, you're going to spend some time in detention. Any further discussion? Yes, Representative Martinez.
Is there any data, thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any data on like age, like an age range in terms of what youth do commit crimes that involve a gun?
I'm not aware of any. There may be, but I'm not aware of any.
Would one of the revisers have that information or be able to? I just don't know how often that happens.
I'm just, I'm not aware. I don't think they have any of that information available.
Oh, okay.
Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my next question would be, this would be the law of the land of Kansas starting in July 1st, or when would this be implemented?
Yes.
And so currently, someone who is the age of 10 that we want to send a message to, could spend potentially 20% of their life on the outside for some reason if a judge decides to use their discretion and give that youth up to 24 months in jail. So my ultimate question is, I know that therapeutic services and all these different things have been brought up. What have we put in place for this first set of children to make sure that they are getting the resources that they need in order to make sure that they are, the message that we should be sending to them should also be the message that we're sending as rehabilitation, and that we should not discard any children? And so what is being put in place currently that makes sure that a program that we are trying to send a message to is also in tandem with us also sending the message of compassion and not throwing children away?
Right. It's my understanding that current law, the Corrections Department is very well aware of the need for restorative justice when kids are in detention or in correctional facilities. They also, I believe, treat 10-year-olds differently than they do 16-year-olds. They understand the difference in age and how that impacts on things. Any further discussions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the original, maybe research would know this, in the original Bill 367, isn't there a review process every so many days or every 2 weeks of somebody that's in detention?
So, Mr. Chairman, there is a review process for detention, right? So keep in mind, we're kind of talking about two different baskets here, right? The provision I was pointing out that's 12 to 24 months is commitment to a juvenile correctional facility, which is the facility here in Topeka, or a youth residential facility, which is the thing contemplated by the other bill. And then detention is kind of the separate item, and that over your case length limit, you're limited under the bill to 90 days. Under the current law, it's 45 days, right? That's your cumulative detention limit, subject to some extensions if you fail to complete programming, et cetera, right? You've enacted in the last couple of years. But if you're in detention, there are reviews, and some of those statutes are in this bill and others are not. But yes, you are reviewed and assessed, and there are ongoing things.
Any further discussion? If not, Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Now that, if a 10-year-old has a gun, there's no choice. He's got 12 months at least. Is that correct? It's not a judge decides, hey, you got 12 months. Is it the decision's already been made as soon as he is caught?
He has to not only possess, but he has to use it, or he has to possess it in the course of a crime. Yeah.
Use it.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's the minimum. Yeah. All right. With no further discussion, I will move my amendment. Do I have a second? Second by Representative Ressman. Okay. Any further discussion? If not, I understand there's somebody on WebEx, but they're not, we're working a bill now. Yes, Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm going to vote yes, but sometimes I think the worst thing we can do is put these kids in, a facility. I just think when you're around people that are in trouble all the time, you just get to be more trouble. So I'm going to vote yes on this commitment, but I also, worry about the kids that are going in that they're going to come out worse than what they did when they went in. So thank you.
You're welcome. Representative Schlingensieben. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too struggle a little bit, but my struggle has to do with some very fundamental decisions that have been made, for a very long time, and one of those was choosing to privatize the system that deals with juveniles rather than having the state supervise what happens. And I am not convinced that we've done a good job tracking and following what's actually happening in those privatized settings. And, you know, I wanted you to kind of look at that sheet called the Missouri plan, or whatever it was called, right? Only because, you know, they deal with juveniles even at the felony level and have really good success rates. And so, you know, to me, it just kind of feels like, is that possible in this privatized model, or is it not possible in this privatized model? And is this a holy cow? Or is it possible to think more comprehensively about how we do this? Now, that being said, you know, this is the third year that I've sat on this committee, and we've talked about these things, and we've heard from people, case managers and other groups who have said, you know, we've got 10%, it's not an exact number, of youth that Senate Bill 367 isn't serving, and we're endangering a lot of other youth and even our staff by not coming up with a solution for these particular youth. I've heard from agencies, I've heard from private, you know, they've all sat in my office, and we've shot the bull on this. And what frustrates me every time is nobody's walking in with a solution. You know, we keep asking for data and about, you know, what programs work. Nobody's coming in here saying, hey, there's great success in this program, you know, or there's great success in this program. And I'm wondering, you know, how is it that we around this table are supposed to be able to solve problems that may have solutions elsewhere, but we're not aware of them? And so, you know, there's a lot of problems here. And so I'm going to support this. I'm going to support it not because I think it's perfect, because I think there's a lot of questions about what sort of programs would even these kids in detention, what should they be put in? What kind of rehabilitative programs will they be subject to? And will that time be just detention, or will they be receiving some kind of programming that has proven effective elsewhere? Now, that's one question that I don't have the answer to, but here's the thing. A lot of people are not going to like this, but I'm going to say this. I want those people to come up with solutions and to bring them to our committee so that we can look at them next year, you know, if necessary, and you'll see that there's a data component built into this as well, so that we're going to track what we're doing and whether it works or not, it doesn't work. But in the meantime, those who are for or those who are against are going to have to really kind of work on something more comprehensive, or be willing to come to some kind of roundtable discussion so that we can do better by our youth, which should be the ultimate goal. I completely agree that whether the youth are violent or whether they're not as violent or anything else, we should be sending them to opportunities for the best kind of care and rehabilitation possible. I really think we need to do that. If this bill, you know, gets us a little step that way, to having these discussions and taking this more seriously, then so be it. Is it perfect? I'm sure it's not. Nothing's ever perfect, but if it puts the fire under us to do something from various points of view, then let it at least do that.
Thank you. I was going to call you doctor for some reason. I am too, sort of. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. This troubles me. I hear both sides of the argument. I typically make it a policy to record my votes in committee, at least the substantive votes. The only time I think that I don't record a substantive vote is when I don't cast a substantive vote because I haven't made up my mind. And right now, I can't make up my mind. I'm not at all persuaded that locking up a 10-year-old for 12 months or 24 months is going to make them a better citizen when they're 14 years old. I'm concerned we're going to make them worse. So I just don't have a lot of faith in, I guess, in what we're doing in a lot of ways. The other side of it is I understand that for the protection of society, there are some people that have to be isolated for society until such time as their behaviors change. And that can happen with a 10-year-old, meaning that 10-year-olds can now access guns and take them to school and shoot people with them. Unfortunately, I can't do anything in this committee today about the proliferation of guns in our society and to restrict access to those guns to only people who have merited access to the guns. But I'm not sure that doing what's proposed here is going to be a panacea. And I certainly hope folks will heed Representative Schlegeln-Sieppen's words and come back to us with something better than just increase the penalties and expect a different result. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate both of your comments, and I too don't think this is a panacea. I do think it's a step in the right direction. And the next bill that we're going to be discussing, I think, has some possible answers to some of the concerns. It provides for group homes, which are structured environments for kids that are now going into foster homes. And it also, as Representative Schlegeln-Siepen said, has a data collection component that we're hoping will then provide us with some data going forward so that we can, modify this, change it, get rid of it in the past. But I do think it's high time that we took some steps. And these are steps that have been recommended by people on the ground. These aren't just things that we've come up with on our own. And so, are there any other points to discuss before we, yes, Representative Seibert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry I was late. I had constituents, but I don't know if I missed it, but I can't seem to find it. And if we, in respect to the previous legislators' questions about what we do with incarceration or lockup on these, maybe I missed it, but what do we do with them if we don't do this? Did I miss it, or what do we do with these minors then if we don't do this particular issue?
Largely, they're put on probation, and then, well, yeah, the subject, they have requirements imposed on them, and they're sent into community services in their home.
I got that part, but what I was reading is if they commit a crime with a gun and kill somebody, I don't know if probation, I respectfully disagree with my attorney, but am I missing that point?
No, I mean, if they kill somebody, the likelihood, I would think, is they'll go to a correctional facility.
It does change that
for some time.
Okay,
But this doesn't, what we're stating doesn't require that they actually kill somebody with the gun.
That was my question. This amendment makes that requirement.
That they use a
Okay.
gun.
All right, thank
or
you.
possess a gun during the commission of a crime. Yes, Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To kind of piggyback on what one of my colleagues said, I'm really trying to get to the point where I'm not letting perfect be the enemy of good. And my apprehension with this bill is not necessarily that I don't think that your intentions are bad. I think that, and I do recognize, like, maybe I'm not picturing what a bad kid is, and maybe I was a mathlete, and like mathletes taught me how to play craps, and maybe those are not bad kids. But my concern is that we are potentially focusing on a very narrowed group of children, and this is going to be a dragnet that sweeps up a lot of kids that went from who are at the cusp of needing guidance versus at the cusp of needing more directed action. I feel like I have a lot of discomfort when it comes to certain things being in place, and I think that I'm going to invoke the 1994 crime bill that had very bad results that people had really great intentions on in the front end, and then we're still dealing with that currently. I would love to see us find ways to focus on supporting children and making sure that they have their needs being met, which that is childcare, healthcare, food security, and housing. And I think that once those needs being met, maybe we'll see a lot less children that need to be incarcerated. So I'm still on the fence on how I feel about this, but that is my 2 cents, and I will not do 3 cents.
Thank you for that. Let me see. Any further question? Any further discussion? If not, I close on my amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The amendment passes. Next, we'll go on to House Bill 2329, which I'm calling the Group Homes Bill. I'll ask Jason, the reviser, to give us his 2 cents on the bill, what it does. And this is the bill as opposed to the amendment that I'll be bringing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to keep it to 1 cent, really. This is as you mentioned, the group homes, as it's called in the bill, non-foster home beds in youth residential facilities. That's the official term. So this would increase placement of juvenile offenders in those beds, require the Secretary of Corrections to pay for costs associated with those beds, and authorize the Secretary to spend money from the evidence-based programs account of the State General Fund to contract for those beds. The first section is just like the one you looked at in the other bill, the placement options for different juvenile offenders. This one is only amended so that juveniles who can't be sent back to where they came from can be sent to home. There are short-term alternative placements, and the bill provides that those placements will be paid for by the Secretary of Corrections, which might just be a clarification, but makes clear who is paying for that. It also removes a provision that expired, but in the other bill would kind of be reinstated. So that's a different story. The second section is the section that directs the Secretary to do what the court ordered them to do. And so there's an amendment there to say the Secretary does not get to decide where to place that juvenile. If they're placed directly by the court, then the Secretary has to follow that directive. The third section is about placement in a juvenile correctional facility. That's the sentencing matrix for juvenile offenders. And we talked about chronic offenders in the last bill. There is a provision about placement in youth residential facilities in lieu of juvenile correctional facilities. And the amendment here is to make clear the Secretary has to pay for those placements. And then the fourth section is the statute about contracting for youth residential facility beds. The current law that was enacted back in Senate Bill 367 allowed the Secretary to contract for not more than 50 non-foster home beds in YRCs. The bill provides that the Secretary shall contract for not less than 40 of these beds. There's also a list of requirements the Secretary follows when making those contracts, including looking at regional allocation and being responsible for the costs for those placements. And then the last section is the evidence-based programs account statute that you're all getting fairly familiar with. This would allow the Secretary to expend an amount not to exceed $10 million in a fiscal year to contract for those non-foster home beds in youth residential facilities.
Thank you, Jason. Are there any questions for the reviser? If not, I'll once again kind of go over the first amendment is simply to merge. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So what you're getting now are the substantive amendments to 2329. Jason, did you? Right. Yeah. You had in mind, and we had in mind then that we would merge the two first, right? So my first amendment is to simply merge House Bill 2325 into 2329, and if that passes, that merger would be done by the revisers after our meeting today. So I make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Representative Schlingensieben seconds that motion. Are there any? Yes, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you. Sometimes we merge bills because we want to preserve bill numbers and shells. Sometimes we merge bills because there's a good substantive reason. Sometimes we merge bills for reasons I don't understand. So help me with how this works into the scheme of what we're accomplishing here.
Sure. So I talked with the revisers. They actually recommended it, and I had both of these bills I viewed as complementary, and we had worked them separately, and I just thought, or we had hearings separately, but they really interrelate, so I just thought it would be best to merge them.
There was some overlap in statutes too, right? Yeah.
Yes, that's right. There were overlap in statutes, so it was just for convenience and to make our lives a little easier.
Thank you for educating me. I appreciate it.
Any further questions on the amendment to merge the two bills? If not, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Okay. Now we're on the merged bill. And yeah, everybody should have gotten the next amendment that we're going to discuss. I think we can start the first on page 2. This really is just a semantic issue. If you see on my page 2, 3 in the whole, we use the term, the statute used the term group home, and to make it consistent with the rest of the statute, we just changed that to youth residential facility. There's no substantive change there. The next one is on page 16. And this is on section 4 on my page 16. The law as it currently reads is that the corrections may contract for use of not more than 50 non-foster home beds in youth residential facilities. And the bill, as I originally proposed, was that they shall contract for use of no less than 40 non-foster home beds. And after discussion with Ranking Member Schlangen-Siepen, we made these changes. So we're now asking that they shall contract for no less than 35, nor more than 45. And the other thing we agreed upon was that we didn't think, and you can say we're not experts, so what we think doesn't matter, but we just both didn't think that it made a lot of sense for the therapeutic purposes of group homes for there to be large group homes, 40. So we have provided that no group home should have more than 15 beds. I think Representative Schlangen-Siepen was suggesting something lower, but at the end of the day, that's what the amendment says. Let's see, if you're looking at the same page, you'll see that insert A, attachment A, and if you turn to that at the end, it looks sort of intimidating, but it's really not. That attachment A is all of current law except the second page of the amendment, which is the underscored language. And that's just providing that we want the Oversight Committee to do what it's already doing in sort of trying to provide data on success of our attempts to improve the juvenile justice system. And it once asked them specifically to monitor the impact and effectiveness of placement of juvenile offenders in the group homes. So it looks like a large amendment, but it's really very short there. And I believe that's the sum and substance of the amendment. Any discussion of the amendment? Yes, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Intuitively, it seems to me that a smaller group home is probably a better environment, and one with 15 beds would be preferable to one that perhaps had 45 beds. But are the facilities available? Will these for-profit companies move to no more than 15-bed model? I know there's economies of scale in about everything that we do. How does that 15-bed limitation impact the overall cost of the program? I don't know. I'm just asking.
Right, so, good question. And before I get to address that, I'd also say the other advantage of the smaller homes is you would have it in different locations around the state. So that would also be a benefit, I think. But I don't know about the costs, but this is giving gratuitous advice to the agency. But if I were there, I would send out a request for information before I send out an RFP and get information from the potential bidders as to what they're looking for and work through it as they can.
Well, certainly given my intuitive preference for smaller group homes, I'll go ahead and support this now with the knowledge, of course, that the Senate thinks they're much wiser than we are, and that people will presumably have an opportunity to be heard on that portion of this amendment if the Senate takes up this legislation, as I hope they will. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Representative Schlingensieben. Oh,
Sorry, he was first.
okay, Representative Neely.
Just along the lines of what he was talking about there, we were talking about this before we got started today, and the fiscal note is $10 million. If you divide that by 40, that's $250,000 per bed. If you turn around and knock it down to 35, that's $285,000 per bed. Everything, and when you're talking about contracting, it sounds like an awful lot of money.
Right, and I just say that doesn't mean that they have to spend $10 million.
Right, but it gives them the
Yeah,
ability.
that's right.
That he was asking if the beds would be there.
That's right.
It would give the Department of Corrections $285,000 per bed to contract with.
That's right, and we're not appropriations, obviously, and there's a process that's already in place. And what I'm going to tell you is probably obsolete at this point, but several weeks ago, I think Public Safety was looking at the evidence-based fund, and they were proposing to take $10 million as lapsed. And I went to them and I said, well, why don't we move that into the group homes idea? And they in principle agreed on that. Now, since it's gone on to our appropriations and it's now over in the Senate, and so how all this funding gets sorted out, I think is going to require some work by me and others on the committee to talk with the appropriators and see if we can work it out in a way that is beneficial for the juveniles of the state. Representative Schlingensieben, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to, sorry, Lance, about butting in there. I was just going to, emphasize the point about regional dispersal of these homes, because there is evidence that demonstrates that youth in these kinds of centers who are close to their families and other networks do better than those who are placed in centralized locations. So I think that's an important aspect of this.
Thank you. Yes, Representative Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, see if I'm understanding this right. So when you place these youth in these beds in youth residential facilities, Are they going to be separated or together with the rest of the youth that are in there? Is there a separate section for them?
Well, it's going to be a group home for juveniles.
So it's a whole group
Yeah,
home for,
it's
oh, okay,
just for
okay.
juveniles. Yeah,
For these specific juveniles?
yes.
Okay, okay, I
And
thought you were
the-
mixing,
the-
okay.
The chief advantage, in my view, is that it's not the foster home situation.
Okay,
It's-
got it. Thank you.
In my understanding of it, it's something like a foster care home,
Right.
but it's more structured.
Right, right. I've worked in a program like that before, and it was very successful. It had some really good programming went along with it. I think it was before Senate Bill 367 went into place, and these were low to mid-level risk youth, juvenile offenders. And I think we had like 12 on the floor at a time. But
Right, so you know better than anybody on the committee then how that would work, so appreciate that.
right, yeah, it was a really good level system, and yeah, I could talk to you for a while about it.
If I might, and then we'll come back to you. So the other advantage of this bill is, under current law, if you read it, it says that under certain conditions, the judge can sentence the juvenile to correction facility or to group homes, or what we're now calling residential youth facilities. The problem is that since Senate Bill 367, we don't have group homes. So my hope is that actually there could be kids that are now going into corrections that should be going into group homes. And so my hope is that this in some way will help those kids. Right? Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For individuals who are in a group home setting, are they able to have visitation at all? Do they have like, or is their family like incorporated in part of their treatment?
Right, so this is not a prison, it's not.
Yeah, so are they able to have guests is essentially my question.
I would think so. I'd be surprised if they couldn't.
Okay, so my follow-up question with this, so it seems like this is good so people wouldn't have to travel far distances if they are able to get, and it's like they're able to be a little bit closer to their community, it seems like, if you have smaller beds. So with 70% of the state living in the northeast corner, is the goal to have geographical disbursement that makes it where people are closer to their communities, or is the goal how are we going to be able to build equity into this model to make sure that someone who is in western Kansas, let's say for instance southwest Kansas where you're from, I believe, doesn't have to end up in like Topeka or like a Wichita type situation just based off of like disbursement of these group homes?
Right, so good question. I think we're just leaving that to the good discretion and judgment of the
Okay,
direction.
so we're going to be okay. I'm sorry. I'm interrupting you. I'm a fast talker. I apologize. And then with this, I'm trying to get to a yes on this. With this bill, with the potential geographical disbursement that will be up to the agency, are we going to be okay with potentially having empty spaces in bed? So these facilities are going to remain open regardless of if they're necessary, or do they kind of like, are they turnkey? Like now we have 5 bad kids who need to be they're not bad enough for the detentions, our juvenile detention centers, but they're just bad enough for a group home setting. Are these going to be like a turnkey situation? Like there's a fist fight down at the liberal high school, our Garden City High School, and now we have 5 bad kids. We're going to turn that on, or are those facilities going to stay open and then we're paying for them regardless? Because if you build it, then we have to fill it. So that's my question.
Right, I don't think, I'm prescient enough to say for sure, but obviously if we have empty beds, then we're going to have to make some adjustments, as I'm sure corrections will either advise us, or my guess is they'll have some discretion in that arena. And once again, I mean, we have to trust that they'll carry out.
Reagan has some sayings about trust, but okay.
we can't, micromanage every aspect of this. Thank you. Representative Schlingensieben, and then Martinez, I'll get to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, a lot depends on what's the program going to be, right? And you've raised some questions too about where will we be able to fill them, and will this be cost effective? I can't answer those questions either, but we're creating a kind of overflow valve in a way for something that we've been hearing about for a long time and hasn't been addressed. And I am hoping and actually working on trying to get us a field trip to Kansas City so that the Missouri side can show us what they're doing in their program, where they have non-recidivism rates of like 77%, and that includes the category we're talking about. And if that's true, then we should take a nice look at it as a committee, maybe after session's out, kind of, come up with a day where we can drive over and get a presentation from them to see what they're doing, and just kind of be sure that we're coming back to this again in the future and not just passing and ignoring. So my 2 cents, thanks.
That does sound like a good idea. Representative Martinez.
Thank you. I just wanted to share that with my experience that I had with the YRC2 program that I worked with, we had level 0 to 5, and 0 was orientation. So it was, and each level allowed, and it was a different set of what do you call it? Like things that you could do. So you earned more allowance each time you went up. You earned longer visits with your, like say your family would come to the facility and visit first, and then it would lead into maybe a few hours, and then a day, and then a weekend, and then a week. And so it kind of transitioned like that. At the same time, the families were receiving therapies and things like that. The youth was receiving therapies. They were able to have free time, and that was earned. So they went from like 30 minutes to 5 hours. The group home supported the kids through their schools and their therapies and whatever they needed in their life. But they would cook together. The staff is so important in something like this because it's something that we want them to transition out of. But we had one youth in particular that was so attached to the staff and the program and everything, that the relationships that he built, that he was in college, because we had a few going to college, and he didn't want to leave. So he stayed 6 months after he could have left. And he bought a car. And so that's where that's where we worked to get those kids. And we had a lot of successes. But like I said, when SB 367 came into play, the group of kids that we were working with at that time, they changed into the more mental health, kids with mental health issues and things like that. Not that they didn't have those, because they did, but they were more juvenile offenders, low to mid-level risks. But we took them on field trips. It was like a family. It was a home setting. It wasn't institutional setting. So everything that, I've been looking for the paperwork so I could go over it, kind of show it to you what we're talking. It was a really good program, and it really had some good successes. And not to say that we didn't have kids that it worked for, because there were a few, but by and large, there was some great successes with that program, and I would really recommend it. I don't know what happened with 367 going into place, but then we got into this punitive thing where we couldn't hold them accountable. And so when we tried to utilize that same program, when they transitioned from the juvenile offenders to the more mental health kids, we couldn't run the same program. So it was just mainly for juvenile offenders, and they would have behaviors more than a lot of mental health, although some of them did. But and I want to share this in particular story that we had 2 gang members, and one was black, one was Hispanic, and I would tell them, "See, I'm going to read you guys a book," and so I'd go down at the end of the hall, and they'd get their pillow and their blanket and wait till everybody go to sleep, and they'd say, "Hey, Miss Angela, are you going to read us a book?" "Yeah." So they'd be down there waiting, but I couldn't tell anybody. But they really did good. One graduated from the program. He went back. He had a child, and he had a girlfriend. He went back. He worked construction, and he went to trade school. But And the other one, I don't know what happened to him, but he did go, graduate out of the program, but I don't know what he did after that. And then he came to visit, and a lot of them came to visit. So it was a really good program. I just can't say enough about it. And I was sorry that I haven't seen one like it since. But the Missouri model that Representative Schlingensieppen's talking about, it's kind of like that. So I think that those programs work because the employees are able to build relationships, and you have to have the right kind of people in there. And it was like a family. It was like a whole family when the kids live there, but they earn things. They earn the privileges to go on field trips, to spend time with family, and it's always appropriate. So I think that something like that is really needed. And I think that that's what's going to work to take some of these kids out of it's changing a mindset. So when you give them a different experience, you're going to get a different outcome. So, but I would really like to sit and share it with you guys sometime.
Thank you. That would be, I like the idea of a group field trip after a session. That seems to me like a very good idea. Any further discussion? Yes, Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Representative, I was just thinking, it talks about 15 beds. Do you put one kid in a bedroom, two kids in a bedroom, do whatever you have to do? Maybe a silly question, but.
Representative Martinez, can you answer that?
We would put one in the room. Sometimes we had rooms that would house two, but we found that it's just better that they have their own space. So we had room for 12 on our floor, on our unit.
Representative Schlingensieppen.
I don't know how it is, in a program that's managed by the corrections side of things, but I mean, DCF has, I think, pretty strict ideas about, how many can be in a room in facilities like that, and it would be good to check with them and see whether those are compatible. But there are some guidelines around that. I just don't know what they are, sorry.
I don't see any further hands, so I'm going to move my amendment. Do I have a second? Representative Schlingensieppen, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. It passes. Okay. Did you get that? Representative Carmichael records his affirmative vote. And Representative Schlingensieppen, and Representative Smith, Representative Martinez, Representative Schwertfeger. Okay, those are all votes to be recorded. We're now on the combined bill as amended. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Oh, good idea, yeah. All right, okay, so I'm going to move on the bill as amended. Second by Representative Ressman. Any discussion on the bill as amended? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Bill passes. And we would like Representative Smith, Representative Schlingensieppen, Representative Martinez, Representative Carmichael, all their affirmative votes recorded. All right, well, thank you for everybody's patience as we and input as we work through these bills. I'm hopeful that we've advanced the ball, and we'll keep working. Thank you. We're going to adjourn.